this is Gizmo88. Today we're going to talk about some issues or complaints. I guess would be more along the lines with Pokemon Sword and Shield. So as you look as you look at your screen, you'll notice in front of you it says CNN Business. Um, yeah, so I thought I would take the time to talk about this because this has really become a viral thing now on the internet, and this is not the first game this year that has seen a similar, some similar issues within the gaming community. Now, um, as you might have known for a while, I'm a pretty big Pokemon fan myself, and I'm thrilled to play the new games. Now, I've played every game in the series out. I own every game in the series. Um, I've been playing the Switch games, both the Let's Go series and also now Pokemon Sword and Shield now for basically since yesterday. And it's a blast to play the games. And uh, the worst part about all this is the things that are taking place because of this. So I wanted to kind of scroll down through this and just kind of go over a few things that CNN kind of noted in their story. Uh, Now this score is actually outdated. It is now up to date with a 3.9 out of 10. So not a huge improvement, but a little bit of an improvement. Also, uh, one of the issues is that the game outlets that have posted positive reviews of the game have been facing harassments and insults by users online. Now, there's no reason for that. There's no reason to insult people or insult and create a hateful situation uh, over these games. It's just not worth it. If you want to express your opinion, that's fine. If you want to leave a comment on it, or even call Nintendo and say, hey, there's just uh, certain things about this game that I don't like. I would rather them, do this or do that differently. Now, granted, out of this score, it only rates of roughly about 1,500 people negative, and then there was a little over 700 positive. So there's still a lot of positive reviews, and granted, the amount of reviews here are very low compared to the amount of people actually buying and playing the game. And I'll get to the Metacritic page here in just a few minutes. So, or in a minute. So they talk about here the cause of the fan irony comes from the belief that the studio cut corners when developing the new game. Now, I don't know how many of you actually know about Game Freak as far as the size of their studio and about how many people that they have working for them. Game Freak is not a big developer. They're relatively small. Their building is relatively small. So there's only so many people they can have working on a project at a time. Not to make excuses, but you do have to keep that in mind. And also, while they were working on these games, they was also working on the Let's Go series, and they was working on My Little Town Hero, which is another game that has also faced some criticism. All three projects at the same time in such a small workspace, a small building, doesn't help. I do feel like if they would have pushed their resources to Pokemon Sword and Shield instead of doing Little Town Hero, I think would have helped a lot. I think Little Town Hero was something they could have done like next year and could have had it out maybe in the summer. I don't think they spent a lot of time on that game, but they did take some time to make that game though while they were making this game. And kind of the same thing with the Let's Go series, where they were working on that one the same time they was working on this one. So there's been a lot go into these games. There's been a lot of people work on these games. These games have had a very big development cycle, and roughly at least 3 years that this game has been in development. It's just with the time constraints and with everything. Sometimes you just cannot get everything done. I'm not going to say that the game doesn't have shortfalls or that it doesn't have issues. But the issues that I'm going to talk about might be different from, what you're thinking. I will mention a couple things. So like a person here mentioned top quality animations. They mentioned one thing that was mentioned is the hashtag Game Freak Light. Now that's where all this started. It started with somebody that didn't necessarily read the translations correctly from the Nintendo Treehouse presentation that was back at E3. And that's where they created the hashtag Game Freak Lied, because they thought they came out and lied about redoing the textures, or the skeletal textures. However, it was never really the case, because Game Freak never came out and actually said that they had to do that, or that they was going to do that. That was just what this person thought. Well, that created a whole controversy, and that's kind of what's played down to this. But you should not, you should not feel, remorse about going in to buy these games. You shouldn't feel, you shouldn't feel like it's unsafe to go into a game store, or even a big block store, a big box store, like Walmart or Best Buy, to buy these games. A number of these places, they've just been receiving complaints, and just people coming in with just hatred towards these games. To be honest, I've never seen anything like it. Being that this is the third game this year that has seen some very high criticism, it's not just Game Freak, and this hashtag Game Freak lied. After they was kind of caught in the act, then they came out and said, well, it goes much further than that. So they was kind of losing their ground a little bit, and this was kind of their way to try to keep their ground, was to try to push it further and further and further. And yeah, we have a person here that mentions this, they're part of this Game Freak Light hashtag, about climbing a ladder. Now, some of the stuff that goes on in the game, you can clearly see, is from the 3DS. I mean, 3DS versions. It's from the handheld versions of the game. Now, keep in mind, Game Freak is a developer that has always worked on handheld games. This is really their first time outside of the Let's Go series actually working with a home console. This was their first full game, though, on an actual home console. So it's to be expected that there's going to be a few things in the game that you wouldn't necessarily expect. It may say a few things that you wouldn't necessarily expect, because they're not a developer that typically works on a home console game. So because of that, that's kind of where we're at. It's a transitional phase, and everybody just needs to have patience and let Game Freak, learn the basics of developing a home console game. Because given the chance, they'll get it right. It's just a matter of allowing them to get it right, giving them the chance to get it right. And just kind of going down further through this article, they talk about, I guess the database currently lists 809 Pokemon. I thought it was higher than that. That might be minus the new Pokemon. I'm not even really for sure, because I was thinking we was well over 900. But nevertheless, there's roughly 500 Pokemon in the game. A lot of these Pokemon that they took out was also Pokemon that you was going to have a very hard time getting. It was they was going to have to do something like with Pokemon Go in order for you to even be able to fill the Pokedex, and just with that alone, that made it that pushed for this difficult decision. You have to be able to get the Pokemon in order to be able to fill the Pokedex, and if they don't have a way for you to do that, other than like Pokemon Go, which again is going to work through Pokemon Home, then it's just not plausible to have the National Dex. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that they won't go back and say in the next games maybe re-add the National Dex and come up with different ways of being able to get these Pokemon. in this particular case, they did remove some moves as well. Now, I looked at the list of moves and I thought, well, I don't know what all the new moves are. So it's very possible that maybe a lot of the new moves are very similar to some of these older moves, and that's why they took them out. I mean, I don't think that they just went in and said, well, we're just not going to put these moves in the game. I mean, I know that's how everybody took it, but I don't really think that's the case. I think it was the case of time constraints and looking at the moves. There's a lot of moves that are very similar, so it kind of doesn't really. It kind of becomes pointless to put in some of those older moves if you have newer moves that essentially do the same thing. It's just trying to keep everything in perspective. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the Metacritic site now. So this is the Metacritic site, and yeah, as you can see, it is now a 3.9, and there's kind of the breakdown of the score. Some of these scores, I'm not going to go over all these. And for one reason is because some of these scores have some inappropriate comments, and I really wish that on Metacritic there was a way to get these comments reviewed, because of the fact that some of these comments are just completely ridiculous, and some are, for that matter, are even inappropriate. This is this is a website that's supposed to be for all. It's not supposed to be an adult-orientated website, and unfortunately, some of these people that have left quote-unquote reviews have taken matters way beyond what they should have done. Now, if they wanted to speak out, that's fine, but a lot of these people that have spoke out on here don't even have the game or haven't played the game, and you can clearly tell that when you read their reviews. So, I encourage people to review the game, but make sure you play the game first. Give an honest review of the game. Don't just go on there and just lash out at the community just because there's something that you don't like. Because just because you don't like something about the game doesn't mean that others don't like it. Doesn't mean that others aren't fine with it. Sometimes in the gaming industry, sometimes decisions have to be made, and it's not necessarily cutting corners. It's just something sometimes you just have to do. And Game Freak is not the first developers to have to make difficult decisions. There's been a lot of developers that have had to make difficult decisions in the past. So this, for the most part, this is really nothing new. It's nothing new that at this point to have seen this kind of thing, but it's, I hope that this ain't going to be an ongoing thing with games from now on, because it's getting to a point now where it's starting to question whether or not if Metacritic is even relevant. If this is the kind of thing that's going to happen when a game comes out. Now, speaking about the game itself, yes, the game does have some issues. However, the issues that the game has is not really, gameplay-wise. I mean, I've heard all sorts of things. I've heard all sorts of things about, the frame rate's not good, or things where the graphics aren't good. Now, keep in mind, all games are not the same. It does seem like there were some very high expectations for this game, but the graphics look pretty decent. The only issues that I see with the graphics is dithering. The game does have some dithering problems, and it seems to carry over kind of from the 3DS games, because the 3DS games actually featured dithering. And I don't know if maybe it's just because it's in that transitional phase with Game Freak that maybe they just didn't really know how to eliminate the dithering, or maybe they was having some trouble, and so they added the dithering in to try to maybe cover up some graphical errors. I'm not really sure. What I do think is if they can cut that dithering down in half, or even make it to where you can put the dithering where you want it, I think it would make the game look a whole lot better. As far as the textures and everything, I don't see any issues with the textures. I mean, they're high resolution textures. Um, there's pretty good detail in some of these textures as well. As far as the animations go, um, it's a lot of the same animations that you've seen in the Pokemon series, you know, for a very long time. I think part of the issue with the animations is just they needed a base to go with. Some of the animations I think look really good, and other animations are just like, yeah, okay, But I'm not gonna lash out just because I see an animation or two that maybe ain't as good as I think it could be. It happens. Um, I wouldn't go as far as to say that they're bad because I don't think they're bad, but they're not, they're not perfect. The game's not perfect by any means, but the animations are pretty decent, I think, for a Pokemon game. I mean, they're not. I do like the way that the Pokemon interact and the way you interact with the Pokemon, and then you have, where you can cook food. I think that's really a really neat feature to the games. Um, one thing that was also criticized was when Game Freak talked about the free moving camera. And again, this all goes back to a studio that has never really worked on console games. So it's understandable um, when they say something like that. I realize for those of us that have played console games with control sticks, analog sticks, thumbsticks, whatever you want to call it, for a very long time, I understand that that's understandable, you know. But for them, this is a totally new thing for them, and so it's understandable that they would be excited about that feature or be excited to call it that because it's just something they've never done before. Um, one thing that I don't see in the game. So some people mention frame rate issues. Now I haven't seen any frame rate issues in the game, so I don't know if that was just maybe a hypothetical thing or just somebody said that it had it. I know there was a lot going on with data miners before the game came out, and there was a lot of things that was said about the game before anybody even got the chance to play the game. Um, Another thing with that as well is that nothing says that they had the final version of the game either. So they might have been seeing stuff that was never true in the first place. Um, but the long and the short of it is there's no reason for the violence. There's no reason um, to be lashing out at retailers or anybody. Uh, the situation has just gotten out of hand, and it really needs to stop. Um, and it's not just with Pokemon Sword and Shield. There's been other games as well. I'm not going to bother to mention those games because this video is not about those games. But just keep in mind that this is something that needs to be addressed. I do look for them to release some patches. There was a bug that was found where um, the game crashes and corrupts the SD card. But it's only the downloadable games as far as I know. That's the only real bug that I see. There's one other issue. I don't know if it's a bug or not. And again, I'll go back to the CNN page here. Let me find it here. Okay, here it is here. Yeah, so this was largely talked about. This was even before the game came out. They was talking about if you climb up a ladder, the world stops. Other than the particular people that mentioned this before the game came out, I have not heard this from anybody after the game came out. And this again would also go back to this, them transitioning from a handheld to a home console. And it's just on a handheld. This is something that which would normally happen on a handheld. I don't know how many actually realize that, but on a handheld, that is actually a very common thing. On a home console, it's not. But at the same time, you know, with the company being in a transitional phase, those kind of things are expected. So I just wanted to mention that before I sign off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button as well, and also hit the bell for notifications. I don't know if anybody's getting notifications when I upload new videos, but and I realize this one was a live presentation, so not even totally sure how YouTube handles that. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, and like I said, go easy on Game Freak, and and try the games out because they're a lot of fun. They really are. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and please subscribe.